All right, good to go.
Welcome everybody to today's Tech Talk. My name is Lucy. I'll be taking over for Regina. Today we're joined by the Tech Academy's co-founder, Erik Gross, who'll be speaking on building community and software development. You can leave all the questions in the chat box. There's going to be a Q&A section towards the end where we'll get to everybody's questions. So thanks for being here, Erik. You can take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lucy. Glad to be here. Well, welcome everyone. The first thing I want to say is that while I am going to do a quote unquote talk today, much of it isn't intended to just be a one-way flow where I'm talking at you. There's going to be several points throughout this where I want to hear your thoughts, your experiences. So I'll go ahead and watch the chat when I ask questions like that. If what you have to say would take a voice conversation, just let people know, and I'll have Lucy unmute you. I'll be glad to hear from you. So since we have a relatively small, like there's 27 people on here, we can manage that to have a little bit of back and forth verbal dialogue, and I'd love that at certain points. So without further ado, let's get started. So I chose the idea of community to talk about today because it's something that I've been actually paying a lot of attention to myself over the last 6 months to a year, and I'm starting to get pretty passionate about. But that means that for a long time I wasn't. The idea of causatively creating an online community or community of any sort, or how to be a good community member, honestly wasn't something that was really top of mind for me as an engineer. There might be a lot of reasons for that. Some of it might have to do with the fact that I'm super old, and when we first started coding in the 80s, it wasn't really a thing. I mean, your community was fellow nerds that people made fun of. But we're in a whole different world now. And with the power of social media and the fact that we're all operating on a giant network of interconnected computers called the internet, the possibilities for good and bad community and everything in between are just tremendous. So I want to talk about two basic things today. One is how to be a good community member in whatever community, whether it's an in-person one, meetups, whether it's an online community, which will be more of the focus of the talk. What does it look like to be a good community member? And then we'll also flip it around to what would it look like to build a community well? What does that really mean? Now, we have less than an hour together, so we're not going to go super deep on this, but what I hope to leave you with is, one, a little bit of an orientation to what that area looks like right now in the technology world. But two, more importantly, I hope that you start looking at your own points of view, your own thoughts about what does it mean to me to be a good member of a community. If you're interested in creation of online community and in-person community, to start to look within yourself and go, well, what does that mean for me? Because without even getting into the material, I can tell you that some of the best communities out there start with a vision, and usually it's a vision of one person, a thought, a reason that they want to gather together with other people. And when it's done without that genuine personal touch, when it's done as a corporate, we need to have a viral community by some big corporation, it inevitably goes nowhere, because community is organic, it's real, it's people deciding on their own for their own reasons to aggregate, to get together, to communicate. So let's go and start with the material. Now the material, this is really sketch. I mean that both as sketchy and also it's kind of a sketch of an outline. There's not a lot here, but I want to share it with you just as a guide so we can start to go through some of the thoughts here. So I'm going to present my screen. And you should be looking at my document. And by the way, just to clear up any nerdy stuff going on, this document is written in a language called Markdown. That's why the document has a suffix or a file type of .md. Right here, you can see the actual Markdown. Looks a little more boring. If you're not familiar with Markdown, get familiar with it. Whether you are in or out of technology, Markdown is an awesome way to write your documents. So first of all, this is where I want a little bit of interaction with you folks. I've got a few examples of what could be considered good communities out there, which good is always a matter of opinion. Let's look at MakerPad just briefly. And I'm now, I'm not sharing my whole screen. So let me go ahead and put that link in chat for anybody that wants to look at it while we're talking along. So just if you care to look at it, there in chat, you'll see the link to makerpad.co. And this is just a really cool community built up around people who are halfway between being a super user of technology and being a programmer. It's a nice little middle ground. If you're on this call, you're either considering becoming a full-on programmer, engineer, or you're already in that training. So you've already made the jump farther than this, but that's what MakerPad is. And it's just an example of a decent community, all right? Jay's Genius. I like this because Facebook is, there aren't that many examples of really, really awesome communities on it, other than less ad hoc, like your community of your, your friends and loved ones that kind of develops. Same thing. Let me go ahead and put this inside the chat. If you give me a moment. There you go. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail on these. I just want you to be familiar with them as decent examples of what community can look like. And I've got one more here, Mom 365. And there's that link in chat. All right, now, first question I have, and I'm going to watch chat on this one, and also just ask anybody who wants to talk at length, if you want to, just to ask to be unmuted in chat. What are some examples of good communities that you've either seen or been a part of? And this can be online or offline. Go ahead and put them in chat if you think of anything. Communities you've really enjoyed being a part of. What was that?
People can throw it in chat, or if they want to raise their hand, then I can unmute the mics.
Good call, Rick. Thank you. Healthy Gamer GG. 100 devs. I'm so glad you brought that up. What a phenomenal group. Others? Okay, good. What's Healthy Gamer GG? Jamie, do you mind coming off with mute and just talking a little bit about that group?
All right, so I just did unmute.
Jamie Lee, you don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I'd love to hear what it is about that community that resonates with you, that you really like. Excellent. And Jeanette, the comment about updated content, real-time interaction is good. What's that in reference to, Jeanette?
When, I guess for me, when it comes to interacting with a community, it's good when there's actual real-time, real people interacting versus just a static, like, okay, we update once a week or something. And I don't feel connected to that. I don't.
Yeah. It just becomes like an information resource at that point, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Excellent. That's great. Okay, good. And Jamie, in talking about the Healthy Gamer GG, says it's similar to Jay's Genius Group. I love that. Yeah. What I really like to see is that some of you are already paying attention to causatively built communities that you love being part of. And that brings me to the first thing I want to stress is that, I kind of alluded to this before, a really successful community, people need to decide to become part of. And it's always a personal reason. I think this is part of the reason why corporate sponsored communities rarely succeed. There are certain exceptions to that rule, but rarely do they succeed because it's not that common that people join up around their favorite company. Other than Apple fanboys, proud to be one, not many companies inspire that, like fierce loyalty and passion and Like they would cause people to band together in a community. And even as much as I love Apple, which is probably too much, I'm not part of any big giant community other than I like Apple products. So it's an organic, genuine connection that drives all of these things. All right, good. Now, community can be done wrong. You probably see in my little slide here, examples of communities getting it wrong, the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook. I'd like to see a show of hands. Go ahead and raise your hand if you are familiar at all with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And Rick, if you can tell me, because I can't see it, what kind of hand raising we get. So I can hear them. A couple. All right, we're not going to do a
Yeah,
super.
we have
Go
a
ahead.
few, sorry. We have a few, like 3 or 4.
Good, excellent. I'm going to hit that link. This is just the Wikipedia article on the Cambridge Analytica data scandal. It's worth your time to read through this, not because, oh boy, scandal. I don't like to spread negative information, but because if you're interested in both being part of a successful online community, and even more importantly, I believe, if you have in your future sites creating community, there's some really valuable lessons about what to do right, what to do wrong in that article, in that scandal. So let me get back to chat here, and I will throw that in. Obviously, you can always just look that up. It's on Wikipedia. Okay, good. There you go. All right, now, without getting in, like I said, into a big giant bunch of drama, can anybody at least think of some communities, online or otherwise, that have quote unquote gotten it wrong, that have messed up in some way, caused a public relations flap, harmed people, kind of got an egg on their face? And you can raise your hand to speak. Ooh. Do you go by William or Bill McMillan? Go ahead and throw your answer in chat. William McMillan. You there? Billy, I like it. So Billy, when you see this Google is a developer's friend, have you seen that as a good or bad example of community? Good. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you have used Google's backend developer tools, their APIs for maps, geolocation, messaging, anything. Good, lots. Okay. Now, raise your hand if it was a good experience. Good. Yeah, absolutely. This is pretty spot on. The same number roughly of people who've used it have said that it's a good experience. And that's a pretty good example of it. They're doing that part right. They really are. Okay. Welcome, Spencer. Good. So what we're looking at is, and it's okay if we can think of any, that's actually a pretty good thing, is examples people have noticed about communities getting it wrong, stumbling, making mistakes. Anybody think of anything?
I would have to say with CD Projekt Red's release of Cyberpunk 2077, how their advertisement was not real, and then when they released it, everybody found out, and that created a really toxic environment.
Spot on. Absolutely. The central thing was just lying, a misrepresentation of what people would receive, right? That's a really, really good example. That is absolutely a community. The gamer community, while everyone's an individual, people who are passionate about gaming, they're passionate about gaming. And if you say you're going to deliver one thing, this is true for anybody. And this is one of the things, the lessons to look at later on when we get into like making your own community. If you say you're going to deliver a thing, deliver it. And if you can't, explain why you couldn't. But don't say you're going to do it deliver something different, and then really not address it. And that comes to a central thing. We're going to move into being a good community member and building good community. But I have to say, before we look at any details, a lot of it just comes down to manners. And manners can really be looked at as practicing good communication and letting the other person know that they're important. Now, that's a real gross simplification of manners, but most cultures, if you break down what people look at as good manners, they can kind of fall into those two buckets. Good communication between people and letting the other person know they're important. Those are part of good manners. And we know it when it happens the wrong way. We can all feel it. If someone has poor communication, if someone makes us feel unimportant, it's bad manners. So let's look at some specifics, though. I'm going to switch back over to my little slide. Let's look at being a good community member. I put down here, know the lay of the land before you weigh in. Now, I'm going to give an example of how not to do this for my own. And it happened over the last 48 hours for me on Twitter. I am not a Twitter expert at all. I've had an account for 13 years. And up until a couple weeks ago, I'd posted 3 tweets, I think, in 13 years. But I started being a lot more active on there, a lot for me. And I really didn't know the lay of the land. Being a nerd and a coder and a trainer and an educator, I saw some posts about some folks that were having trouble in studying JavaScript and decided to help because I love to teach. I teach a lot of JavaScript. And they were under a hashtag that was already mentioned called 100 devs. I didn't know what it was. And that's where all the trouble started, is I didn't know what it was. So I put out a little offer. Hey, listen, if anybody, I see people that are on this 100 devs thing that are maybe having some trouble with JavaScript, I'd love to help. Long story short, that made it look very clearly like I was somehow involved with this thing, which I found out was a big giant initiative and a great training program and there's a whole mentorship and online cohorts of training. It's amazing what they're doing. I didn't do my homework. I didn't know that. And so when I weighed in, I made a dog's breakfast of it and looked like an idiot, mainly because I was being an idiot. So when there's a community, know the lay of the land before you weigh in. Just look around at the landscape. Watch other people communicate and how they communicate. Watch interactions. Watch how the thing is organized. Look at how do people actually interact on here. What's the main thing they're doing before you just jump in. Next thing to look at is if you decide to take a bit more of an active role in a community, make sure you can deliver before you commit to help. If there's some moderation of a specific subgroup in it, for example, where you're like, wow, I'm really passionate about this. I feel like I want to help in it. Really examine whether you're going to have the time available for it to put in the effort. If you need to, do a little homework, check with someone else who's already doing a similar activity in that group and say, realistically, what does this actually take? What's it going to look like? Because the sense of community, the fact that people decide to stay in there is all based on mutual trust, respect, understanding. And that starts to undermine if you obligate yourself to take on a role and then don't. And it can damage the whole community. So if it's an area you're passionate about, know what it means before you raise your hand and go, hey, I'd like to help. And I think in life, we've all sort of seen examples of that where I probably should have considered that a little bit before I said, yeah, I'll do it, But the flip side of it is, I highly recommend getting involved when it's a group you have passion about. All too often in this world, it's really easy to be cynical. What's in it for me? Well, for those of you who've gone through the training here and have gone through the job placement course, you probably already know this to be true. But for the rest of you, it's just been my reality that we're at our best when we're helping other people. And that if your efforts to be in communication with people and be part of community are rooted in a genuine desire to understand people better, to help forward a thing, then it will come back to you in some way. But mainly because you're doing it because that's not the reason for it. You're not doing it to get something out of it. It will come back. Now, let's look a little more specific here. Being a good community member, and this next bullet point, true in life, period. Always answer communication. Just do it. Now, this is not my strong suit. I've had to work really hard at it over the years. Sometimes you get busy. Sometimes it's something you don't want to confront, and so you'll like put it off and then you'll get back to it later. A community is as alive as it communicates in and around itself. It's like its lifeblood is the communication. So pay attention to this. If you're going to dive in, don't let that inbox, that internal inbox, just sit there unanswered. Even if you can't get what the person wants right away, let them know that you're looking at it. Always answer your communication. Use that system. Find out what the system is. How do I handle routine actions inside that community, inside that group? And how do I handle special situations? And the special situations can be good or bad. Give you an example. You've been part of a group for a while and you're pretty passionate about it, and you see a need for maybe a dedicated subgroup. How do you create one of those? Don't go off half-cocked without doing the research to find out how does that work here. It might be that you've done something different, in another group or another area of your life, and you think you'll take that same tactic here. Find out how things work in the group you're in. If you need to, find a moderator or a mentor, someone who's been around for a while, you can kind of ask, give me the lay of the land here, and then propose it. Also, these special situations can, unfortunately, every once in a while, be negative ones. What if you're getting harassed? What if there's a group member that really is causing trouble in some way? How is the group you're in set up to handle that? And by the way, as a red flag, if the group doesn't have anything in place about how to handle those things, that should be pretty significant. But chances are, because people are basically good, that the group has some method in place. Find out what that is and use it to resolve the situation first. And ultimately, if you do everything you can to try to resolve it and it doesn't resolve, maybe then it's not the group for you, but work with the group and how its policies to lay down first. And finally, this is one usually I'm good at. When I'm not, it kicks me in the behind. Always think twice about responding. Now, we've all kind of heard this around when you're upset. Just walk around, take a breather, reconsider your response. This is, by the way, why many, many years ago, I went to my Gmail account and I put in a 30-second delay on email sending. When I click send, it actually doesn't send for 30 seconds. And for 30 seconds, a little button remains at the bottom of the screen that says cancel. And I can click it and fix anything I need to. Now, part of it was so that if I mistyped something or whatever, I forgot something, I'd have a chance to put it in. But the other part is, honestly, there's times when you should just hold off and just chill out and then communicate from a point of view of a little more calmness. I just recommend this in life, but in particular, these organic communities that you're trying to build or be part of, it's super important. On the flip side, sometimes you're super excited about something and you just, boom, put it right out there. In both cases, the thing I'm recommending that you do is just consider the person or persons that communication is going to arrive to. Look at what you're about to say from their point of view. Is it the right thing to say at that point? Will it add more life and vitality and, companionship and joy to the picture, to the community? Or will it detract from it in some way? Just consider that before you send stuff out. So that's enough on being a good community member. Now I want to address the fun part. And this isn't for everyone. Again, until recently, it wasn't something I paid enough attention to, in my own judgment. Building a community, a good community. The first thing that I recommend is just start paying a little more causative attention to the communities you're already in. Live ones, meetups you go to, civic groups you might be part of, gamer clubs, whatever they're, just start paying attention. What do you like about being a part of that community and the way it's run? And what don't you like? What would you do better if you had the power to do it? And then start to educate yourself. the thing I'm finding is that good communities don't just happen organically. They're caused with leadership. Now I'm going to find a specific book that, for the nerds out there, I think you'll find pretty interesting in this respect. Give me just a moment to look this up. I actually have to look at my Kindle reader because I am reading it as we speak. And then I'll put the link to it in the chat. Those of you who want to look it up ahead of time, it's called Building Successful Online Communities. All right, there it is. And I'll get you the link in chat right now. Now, a note about this. It was published a while ago, but it's still worth reading. What's unique about this book is that they approach the idea of online community purely from a scientific basis, disregarding all opinion about what the right and wrong thing to do in creating community is. What do the facts actually demonstrate? And while much of the work they did on it is from about 15 years ago, the internet, the web, the communities on it were still sufficiently large, observable, and well-studied that they actually come up with some really good conclusions. The other thing I like about the book is that you can, after you've read the introduction chapter, as a designer and organizer of communities, you can just pick and choose which chapters you want to look at from that point forward, and they're all cohesively wrapped together under one subject. It's a pretty smartly designed book. So, never mind whether it's that book or others, I hope my point comes across, which is that you should educate yourself about good and bad things involving creating a community. What's the right thing to do? What's the wrong thing to do? How do I put together good policies for, engagement and for handling, the very rare, difficult person to be part of the community, right? And that's something that you have to decide upon. You give good thought to as you're building these communities. The other thing about this is that if you're going to take on that leadership role of, hey, I'm going to put myself out there and literally start to create a community, just be aware that you're going to have to practice constant alertness. Always be paying attention to how things are going and be willing to change. These communities are composed of individuals, and each of them, while they may have originally been united in that group around some central passion or reason to join together, they're all each individuals. And as each of them changes on their own, the thing that they make up, this community, can start to change. As the organizer, creator of the thing, you've got to pay attention to that and be willing to change along with it, to handle the ebb and flow of what happens inside the community that you're growing. Another reason I like that book is it has some really good things to say about how to handle those kind of things. But just recognize that this community put together isn't like a computer program where it's up and running and it just does the same thing all the time and you just leave it alone until you need to change its behavior. No, it's live and real. And it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Whatever is going on in people's lives or in the greater outside world inevitably will have an effect on that community. And you've got to pay attention to those kind of things. And in real time, decide what to do about them. And finally, I just think it's pretty important to know about how you're going to handle harmful members before you have to handle one. Now, I'm not putting too much stress on this because honestly, most people are really good. And the vast majority of members in any group are pretty awesome. But, the one bad apple spoils the barrel kind of thing. It's so true. If you could have 10,000 people in a group, and if 20 of them are very vocally cancerous and horrific to interact with, fomenting upset, causing to come to being, creating upset, their effect goes far beyond their numbers. And when you're ready to make the call about how to handle it, you're already going to need to be able to hold your ground and be firm, but effective. The last thing you want to be doing is casting about for, well, what should be the policy here? How should we handle that? Think about it ahead of time. Have it in place. And then do not hesitate to cut off that cancerous part of the group to save the rest of it. Sometimes you feel this need to be a nice person, especially those of us who are really good. It can be hard sometimes to think that there are people that just really thrive on chaos and destruction. There's a very small amount of them out there, but they do exist. And if that happens, know ahead of time what you're going to do and just have the guts to do it. So that the group that you put together, because of your passion, your joy of a technology, a game, an activity, or whatever it is, that group that you help put together, full of so many people that share that same thing, that it doesn't go away or become irreparably harmed because you didn't have the guts to just say, you legitimately don't belong here, and you're gone. So we're not going to end the talk on that because I'm going to open this up to a lot of Q&A. I just want to stress it because all of the rest of this is all about good intentions and joy and passion and shared experience and again, community. But every community, from a family to a small company to a social group or whatever, it's inevitable that at some point along the lifetime of that group, someone will be in it that's out to cause harm. It's going to happen. Know what you're going to do about it ahead of time. And that way, everybody else can just get about the business of enjoying why we have this community and why it's together. And they can be really, 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 really cool. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back to the talk here. And I just want to open this up to any kind of Q&A. I'll watch the chat. If you want to speak out loud, that's totally fine. Just raise your hand and work with someone will be able to unmute you. What kind of questions do you have? Anything at all?
And anyone can leave their questions in the chat. And yeah, if you do, the microphones are turned on if you do want to ask questions as well. One question I do have for you, Eric, finding these communities where you have an interest, where are some of your favorite resources to find good communities to be a part of?
Well, I'll tell you what the way it was 2-3 years ago. I really do like Meetup. I think Meetup's pretty cool. Obviously, with COVID, the whole in-person thing changed a fair bit. What I'm finding now is that you bump into certain ones on whatever social media channels you already have, and those are kind of cool. You can find some fun stuff, but some of them you have to really go out to find. Here's an example. I wanted to get back into playing Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I'd been, for those of you who've played, you're going to know what these terms are, but I'd been a dungeon master, the person that runs the game, for the last 30 years. It had been so long since I actually just played as a player. I couldn't even remember the last time. And I had to look really hard to find that community, find that small group of 5 to 8 different players and a DM. That's a community right there, right? Ultimately, I found a resource called Roll20, which is online. Found out they had a whole listing of available games, people that are looking to like be part of things. And I found my community. That one I had to go after and look on purpose. A lot of them, though, and that'll happen. If there's something you're super passionate about, clearly you'll go out and find it, which is what I did. It took me several days. And I went and found the community. Okay. Thanks, Jeanette. Thanks, Billy. Others, they're already going to be like tangential to something you're already involved in. You just have to kind of either be paying attention and they'll come into your area, And again, Facebook or Reddit or that kind of thing, or with a bit more of a casual look, you'll find some. So, and yeah, Reddit is great for it as well. But honestly, I found some really, really cool groups of people through just the big three with, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I found some really, really cool people to be, a group with, or part of a group with. Also, I just want to point out, I really like it when that's what I use Facebook or Twitter or Instagram for, because I happen to feel like that's a good use of those platforms. Find good communities, awesome people, and use it for that. Use those platforms for that purpose. That's a personal thing. Other questions, comments, observations? I'm willing to talk about anything.
Well, one thing to note, meetup.com, and there are other resources as well. It's a great place for developers. And there's a lot of great groups from Python to C# to game development, that kind of thing. A lot of great groups in Portland, and a lot of great groups just in the world, really. So highly recommend checking that out if you're new to development.
Oh, another one, Twitch. Twitch is cool. It used to be all just revolving purely around, broadcasting gameplay, but they on their own, on purpose as a company and just organically are starting to stretch out in a lot of different areas. Like if there's an area you have passionate about, look it up on Twitch. You'll find something cool probably. Oh, Jacob, great point. Discord, duh. It's fun. Yeah, I should mention that one because when I did find that group for D&D, that's where we all just hang out. And in between our weekly games, that's where all the cool chatter happens. And like, I can't believe what happened in the last session. And oh my word, we're screwed when we get back. We're all going to die. And what are we going to do? Discord is excellent for that kind of thing. There's another, it's such a great example, Jacob. There's a brand new web framework or a tool for web frameworks that helps you deploy your web applications a little more easily. And let me just look on my Discord right here. And it's called Cyclic, Cyclic. It's worth checking out. They're really, really cool. You can just look up Cyclic deployment tool online. And they have a really thriving Discord channel. Engineers, instructors, nerdy people that really enjoy this kind of thing. It's a great example. Discord is an awesome, awesome example. And their browse tools, finding similar people are pretty cool. So that's great. Jeanette, Slack, there might be a cool way on Slack to find community, but I haven't seen it yet. Once you are in a community, it is an excellent community communications tool. I use Slack daily, in and out all the time, right? But as for finding community, there might be a way to use that, but I haven't found it yet. Oh, Telegram is kind of like that as well, Renato? That's really interesting. I got to admit, I hadn't really looked at Telegram. I thought it was almost like Signal or just another, safe encrypted communications tool. That's all I thought it was. So I'm going to have to look up Telegram. Good. Other comments or questions? And it's fine if there's nothing. It's totally cool. All right, good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, logging on and listen to me yammer. I especially appreciate the level of participation in this class, and not being just passive consumers and viewers of what I was going to say. It's kind of about, that's what community is about, is being involved, and I appreciate it. So if you find there's some really cool, awesome community you find, let me know. I want to know about it, and I'm going to put out here my Twitter handle. Grab that, totally fine to just shoot me any kind of cool thing you find, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Other than that, thank you for the time. I appreciate it, and I will let you go. Any homework or any housekeeping you need to take care of, Rick, before we end off?
No, I think we're good to go. Eric, great talk. We do appreciate you coming out, and community is important, whether it's development or any other interest that people have in life. So good, definitely good information.
Excellent. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. All right, everyone, thanks for coming to the Friday Tech Talk. We will have another talk next week. Lucy, do you have details on that for next week's talk?
Yeah, so next week's talk is going to be with Katie McIntyre. She's going to be just talking about building the perfect resume and working on your LinkedIn profile, just like basic job recruitment tips and advice like that. So that's going to be next Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time again.
Sounds awesome. All right, everyone, thanks for coming out, and we will see you next week.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.